The clock struck 7:45 p.m. Inside a posh restaurant that oozed luxury and elegance. The hum of conversation was interrupted by the clinking of glasses and the soft scrape of fine china against polished wood. But amidst the refined chatter and laughter, something unusual was unfolding. A scene so ordinary, yet so profound, it would change the lives of two strangers forever. At a corner table, under the dim golden lights, sat a young boy. His small frame was propped up by a cushion, his eyes wide with excitement as he gazed out of the window at the city skyline. His hands trembled slightly as he attempted to feed himself, the spoon slipping out of his grasp. Beside him, his mother, a woman draped in a designer dress, looked on with a mix of helplessness and frustration. The boy was disabled, and though he had everything money could buy, it was clear that there were things even his billionaire mother couldn't provide him. But then, the waitress entered. Someone who had no idea that her simple act of kindness would spark a chain of events that would forever alter the course of her life and the boy's. The waitress, a young woman in her mid-20s named Emma, had been working at the upscale restaurant for just over a year. Her life had been nothing extraordinary, working long hours, barely making enough to pay for rent, and always wishing for something better. Yet, she had an energy about her, a quiet strength that shone through even in the most mundane moments. It wasn't the kind of thing people noticed at first, but it became clear to anyone who took the time to observe. As she approached the table, carrying a tray of food, her eyes met the boy's. There was something in his gaze, a mixture of curiosity and longing, that struck Emma deep within. She had seen plenty of disabled children before, but there was something different about this one. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. Maybe it was the way he smiled despite his difficulties, or the way he tried to feed himself with such determination, as if every bite was a small victory in a world that had been unkind to him. The boy's mother, Caroline, was busy scanning the restaurant, her eyes darting over the other guests. The scene in front of her, the struggle of her son trying to feed himself, was a painful reminder of her helplessness. She had everything money could buy, every luxury, every comfort. Yet, when it came to her son's disability, she had no answers. No amount of wealth or influence could change his condition. She felt trapped, helpless, and increasingly disconnected from the world around her. Emma placed the food in front of them with a polite smile, but before she could walk away, she noticed the boy's struggle again. She hesitated. Something inside her urged her to act, to do something more than just offer a polite service. "Would you like some help?" Emma asked, her voice soft yet sincere. Caroline glanced up, surprised. She was used to people either ignoring her son's difficulties or offering pity in the form of hollow sympathy. But this waitress, this young woman, seemed genuinely concerned. Caroline started, her voice faltering. She was not used to asking for help. But in that moment, her pride seemed smaller than the discomfort in her heart. She nodded, handing Emma the spoon. Without a word, Emma gently guided the spoon to the boy's mouth, carefully feeding him as though it were the most natural thing in the world. The boy, whose eyes had been filled with a kind of sadness just moments before, lit up with a smile. It was a smile so bright, so pure, that for a fleeting moment, the weight of Caroline's burden seemed to lift. Emma took her time. She didn't rush. She didn't act as though she were performing a task. No, she was present, completely present. The boy, whose hands trembled, held onto the spoon, trying his best to keep it steady. Emma noticed the way he gripped it, and a small part of her heart broke. She had always taken for granted the simple act of feeding herself, never understanding the enormity of such a task for someone who had no control over their own body. When she finished, the boy's face was beaming. Caroline watched, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. It wasn't just the act of feeding him, it was the way Emma had done it. There was no pity, no awkwardness, just kindness. A kindness that Caroline hadn't experienced in a long time. "You didn't have to do that," Caroline said, her voice low, almost a whisper. She looked down at her son, whose eyes were now filled with admiration for the waitress. Emma smiled gently, wiping her hands on the apron she wore. "It's my pleasure," she said, her voice calm and warm. "Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness." He's a fighter, and he's lucky to have you." Caroline blinked, taken aback by the unexpected sincerity of the words. For a brief moment, it felt like the weight of her own life, her perfect but painful life, had been seen. She wanted to thank Emma more, but the words escaped her. She had spent so much time in a world of superficial connections, of people only interested in her wealth, that the raw honesty in Emma's voice felt like a foreign language. As Emma walked away, Caroline's mind raced. Why had she been so closed off, so disconnected from others? She had spent her life building an empire. Yet here she was, in a moment of vulnerability, standing face to face with a young waitress who had given her son something more valuable than gold. She had given him dignity. Emma disappeared behind the kitchen doors, and Caroline sat in silence, her thoughts swirling. Her mind drifted back to the life she had chosen. The long hours of meetings, the lavish parties, the endless streams of money and success. All of it had come at a cost, at the cost of truly living, at the cost of really seeing the people around her. She had been so consumed by her own pursuit of perfection that she had forgotten the most important thing of all, connection. The evening continued. The restaurant buzzed with the energy of the city's elite. But for Caroline, the world felt different. She had been shaken by a simple, unassuming gesture. And though she was aware that this would not solve her problems, she knew deep down that it had sparked something inside of her. A change. Later that night, as she walked to her car with her son in tow, Caroline found herself glancing back toward the restaurant. She spotted Emma as she cleaned a table near the back, and for the first time in a long while, Caroline felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the kindness Emma had shown her son, but for the reminder she had given Caroline herself. But this wasn't just a fleeting moment. No, Caroline knew she had been marked by it, and she knew that something inside her was about to shift. She had seen the way Emma had treated her son, not as a charity case, not as someone to pity, but as a person worthy of respect. It made her question her own life, her choices, her priorities. And most of all, it made her wonder if she could ever be more like Emma. The world seemed to stand still for a moment as the thought lingered in her mind. Emma, meanwhile, had no idea the impact she had made. She had simply done what came naturally to her, what felt right. Helping others, especially those who needed it most, was part of who she was. It was the way she had been raised by her grandmother, who had taught her that a single act of kindness could change a life, even if you never saw the ripple effect. But as the night drew to a close and Emma prepared to leave, she couldn't shake the thought of the boy and his mother. There was something different about them, something more than just wealth and luxury. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it felt like she had glimpsed a part of their world that no one else had seen. The next day, as Emma arrived at work, she found herself thinking more and more about the encounter. It wasn't just the act of feeding the boy, it was the way his mother had looked at her afterward. That brief moment of connection had left a mark on Emma. She had often dreamed of something more, something bigger than serving food in a restaurant. But she had never expected that her dreams would be connected to someone so far removed from her own reality. As the day went on, Emma's mind kept wandering back to that table. Caroline, the billionaire mother, had left the restaurant in a hurry after the meal, but Emma knew she would never forget the look in her eyes. It was as though Caroline had been given a glimpse of something she had long since lost. Something real. Little did Emma know, her life was about to take a dramatic turn. A turn that would connect her to Caroline and her son in a way neither of them could have ever imagined. The following week passed in a blur for both Caroline and Emma. Though they were from completely different worlds, the brief, seemingly insignificant encounter between them lingered like an unspoken promise in the air. For Caroline, the billionaire businesswoman, it wasn't just the kindness of the waitress that had stuck with her. It was the reflection it had caused. That brief moment with Emma had sparked something within her that she hadn't realized was buried so deep. It was the kind of awareness that threatened to change the course of her life forever. Caroline had always been surrounded by wealth and influence. Her world had been a carefully curated image of power and success, her every move calculated and controlled. Yet, deep inside, there had been a gnawing emptiness. She had spent so many years building an empire, chasing after accolades and recognition, that she had forgotten what it was like to feel truly connected to others. Her son, Jason, was her world, but there had always been a distance between them, a space she couldn't quite bridge, no matter how much she tried. The more she gave him material things, the more it felt like she was losing him emotionally. The more she tried to fix his physical condition, the more she felt helpless and out of control. But Emma had reminded her of something she had forgotten. Real connection wasn't about fixing someone or making them conform to expectations. It was about seeing them for who they were, embracing their struggles, and offering kindness without judgment. That night, as she sat at her penthouse apartment, gazing out at the city below, Caroline found herself contemplating her life in a way she never had before. She was no longer focused on the business deals that awaited her or the next acquisition she was about to make. Instead, her thoughts kept returning to the young waitress, Emma, and the impact she had unknowingly had on her. It was as though that simple act of kindness had cracked open a door in Caroline's heart, one she hadn't known existed. As Caroline sat there, lost in thought, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her assistant, a simple note about a meeting the next day, but for some reason, Caroline didn't feel like attending. She felt a strange pull to something else, something more personal. She had spent too much time in the world of business, too much time focusing on numbers and figures. Perhaps it was time for a change. She glanced at her son, who was asleep in the next room. Jason's condition had always weighed heavily on her, but she now saw it in a new light. Maybe, just maybe, the solution wasn't to try and fix everything with money or influence. Maybe it was time to connect with him in a way she never had before. The next morning, Caroline made an unexpected decision. She would go back to the restaurant, the place where she had met Emma. It wasn't something she normally would have done. After all, she wasn't used to returning to places she'd been before, especially not when they involved something as seemingly trivial as a waitress. But there was something about Emma's genuine kindness that called to her. She couldn't explain it, but she needed to see her again. Caroline arrived at the restaurant during lunchtime, hoping to find Emma. The restaurant was bustling with the usual crowd of high-profile clients, but Caroline didn't care about any of them. She wanted to speak to Emma, to thank her for that brief, life-changing moment. As she walked in, her eyes scanned the room, searching for the young waitress. It didn't take long before she spotted her, moving gracefully between the tables. Her face lit up with a natural, unforced smile. There was something about Emma, something different from the other staff. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, wasn't concerned about what anyone thought of her. She simply existed in the moment, doing her job with care and attention. Caroline felt an overwhelming urge to speak to her, to thank her. Emma noticed Caroline almost immediately. She hadn't forgotten the woman who had thanked her the week before, and when she saw her now, standing in the entrance, it took her a moment to realize that Caroline wasn't just here to eat. She was here for something else. Emma smiled softly, then walked over to her, her eyes slightly cautious but friendly. "Hello again," Emma said with a warm smile, trying to keep the surprise out of her voice. "Can I get you a table?" Caroline hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with you," she said, her voice steady but filled with a certain vulnerability she wasn't used to showing. Emma raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Of course, what's on your mind?" Caroline took a deep breath before speaking. "I just wanted to thank you," she began, "for what you did last week. The way you treated my son. It wasn't just the feeding him. It was the way you saw him. The way you treated him like a person, not someone to pity. You reminded me of something I've forgotten, what it's like to truly connect with people." Emma's eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't expected Caroline to come back and say something like this. She was used to people brushing past her, unaware of the small gestures she made. But here, in front of her, stood a woman who seemed genuinely moved. Caroline continued, her voice softening as she spoke. "I've spent my whole life trying to fix everything with money, trying to control everything around me. But what I realized last week was that no amount of wealth can replace real connection. And it's something I've been missing. With my son, with myself. I don't know what's next, but I feel like this moment changed something inside me. Emma listened quietly, her heart softening. She had never expected such a heartfelt confession from someone like Caroline. But in that moment, Emma understood that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, was immune to the struggles of life. Everyone in their own way was searching for connection, for meaning. I don't know what I can say, Emma replied, her voice gentle. But I'm really glad I could help in some way. Caroline smiled, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. You've helped more than you know, and I'm grateful. But I also wanted to ask you something. If you're not too busy, would you like to have dinner with us sometime? I know it's not much, but I feel like we should get to know each other better. Emma blinked, a little caught off guard by the invitation. This was completely unexpected. But there was something about Caroline's sincerity that made her want to say yes. It felt like an opportunity to connect with someone in a way that went beyond the surface. Yes, Emma said, her voice unsure at first, but gaining confidence as she spoke. I'd love to. And just like that, a bond began to form, one that neither of them could have predicted. Caroline's life, once so rigid and controlled, was now open to the possibility of change. And Emma, who had once only dreamed of something more, found herself stepping into a world she had never imagined. They exchanged numbers, and before Emma could return to her duties, Caroline handed her a small card. This is my personal number, she said. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. As Caroline left the restaurant, Emma stood there, her mind racing. She had no idea where this would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. It was the beginning of something new, something meaningful. And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt a sense of purpose, a sense of possibility. The next few weeks would unfold in ways neither of them could have anticipated. But one thing was certain. Their lives were forever intertwined now, and they were both about to learn that the power of a simple act of kindness could ripple out into something far greater than either of them could have imagined.